Hi, I'm Chris Ippolito, and welcome to Get Coach 360, where I'm documenting my journey from employee to entrepreneur while featuring the coaches that are helping me along the way. Each episode, these coaches provide actionable advice to help me and you, the audience, find more success as entrepreneurs. I invite you to join the journey so we can go and grow together.
Welcome to another episode of Get Coach 360. In this episode, Chris sits down with Lucas Root, business consultant, strategy speaker, startup mentor, and founder of SGIC Consulting. Lucas takes Chris on an exploration into meta-learning and differentiates how simple memorization is a far cry from truly integrating new information into your skills and knowledge base. Lucas goes on to discuss routines and techniques which he uses to optimize his learning curve to always stay ahead of the game. And, in addition to Lucas's lifelong passion for learning, he also discusses his passion for finding small businesses with causes he believes in and coaching them to success using his wealth of knowledge gained both from his own self-studies as well as his experience working with the best and brightest minds of Wall Street big business. And, as always, we'll close with Lucas sharing his advice for how you can take action now to level up wherever you need it most.
Hi, Lucas.
Hey, Chris.
Welcome to the Get Coach podcast. Glad to have you on. The topic we're going to be talking about is I geeked out over it for a few months, but we'll just leave that as a little cliffhanger. I'd love to start off the episode with if you could share your story of how you got to be where you currently are at.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. So after graduating college, I launched directly into Wall Street in the mergers and acquisitions world on the project side. So I was helping to implement a merger or a divestiture. What's really cool about what I was doing was I had an amazing access to some of the most incredible minds in the business world today who were grappling with huge challenges and huge problems, because obviously a merger or a divestiture, it doesn't happen when both companies are doing great. Typically, it happens when one of the companies is not doing so great.
Yeah.
So, I was in this position where I was exposed to some amazing business problems and working with some of the most capable minds in the world of solving those business problems. And so, and this was intentional. I followed that track to be able to learn from some of these people, not anyone in particular, but that market. What you find, particularly as a young project manager in that world, is that 100% of the time you feel like you're behind and you're trying to catch up. Every single person around you, which is great. Every single person around you is smarter than you, knows more than you, has more experience than you. And this is a phenomenal place to be when you're trying to ingest an enormous amount of information quickly. But obviously it's a challenge as well, because in order to be able to have a seat at the table, to some degree feel like you deserve to have a seat at that table, you have to be able to grow into those very large shoes that you've decided to create for yourself very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever experience the imposter syndrome, that feeling and sensation of, what am I doing here? Like, I don't know if I belong here.
Yeah. Actually, no, believe it or not.
Oh, good. Good for you.
I never felt like I didn't belong. I always felt like I was the least experienced in the room. When you're in a situation where a whole bunch of people are trying to solve a problem together, you don't necessarily question being the least experienced person in the room or at the table. You don't necessarily question if there's a place for you. And so from my perspective, that preempted the problem of imposter syndrome, which I totally understand where that comes from, because I was there. But we were all working together hand in hand, doing the best we could at the jobs that we had. And again, let's keep in mind, half the people in that room were coming from a business that was not doing so well. Still incredibly capable, intelligent, an amazing amount of experience. But for whatever reason, their business wasn't the strong one in that room. And my job was to put these people together in a way that was cohesive. And I was
Right.
good at that. I wasn't good at their jobs, but I was good at my job.
Yeah, you brought your own strength and skill set to it.
Yeah.
What through that journey, because that's an interesting world. I've I had a career in the world of finance, and we talked a little bit about this in our intro call, where when you're around large numbers like that, you kind of almost get desensitized to it. It's such a weird feeling. So now somebody shares this a story of like, oh, this person, you know, I don't know, made a couple $100,000, and you're kind of like, oh, that's nice.
That's
Where
nice.
because
Tuesday.
you're just so used to hearing numbers in the millions or hundreds of millions. And I think you had mentioned there's a couple of deals that were like in the billions of dollars.
Yeah. Two of the deals that I worked on were multiple billions of dollars. And in one of them, I was personally responsible for $2 billion over the course of less than a year. Yeah, huge numbers. I mean, you're 100% right. It changes your perspective so much. In my career, I've managed, um, $2 billion in one year one time. It wasn't every year, year after year, but one time. I've hired 9,000 people, or been directly responsible for that hiring, and I've fired 7,000 people. And these numbers are so monstrous that when I personally made the decision to start mentoring small businesses, the numbers in small businesses, which matter and are meaningful to the people that are there, shocked me. You know, I don't mean this in any way to be belittling, but it was a real recentering of my focus when I sat down at the table of a small business that was doing 750,000 a year in revenue, and I was like, what? Yeah, and it was good. It was a good way to be recentered and shocked, because those numbers matter to those people.
Yeah, absolutely. What led you to where you're at right now? So you went through the career of the mergers and acquisitions, and then now, because you're not a business coach. That I should say that, because a lot of my guests are business coaches, or have ran multiple businesses, and we talk a little bit more from their entrepreneurial experience. Your journey has been a little bit different in that you've been just around big business and success for so long that that's kind of where you learned, and now you mentor, you offer your time to small businesses to help them out. How did you I guess, what's that story behind that transition?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I was in Wall Street for 17 years, and over that time, what I started to realize was that, but for no bad reason, all of the consulting companies in the world are doing the best they can to snatch up all of the best talent, the people that have the experience that I have out there, um, and they're bringing those people to bear on very large companies. What that means is that, the middle market companies, people with 500 to say 5,000 employees, they can't compete for that knowledge, and instead they're left competing for knowledge that's, um, different, not necessarily less, but different. So, say somebody starts a business, runs it for 3 years, and then the business crashes and burns. That person is an incredibly valuable asset. And so, middle market and small market people are competing to get that person who's been through the heart and soul of starting a business and trying to keep it afloat, but hasn't been through it 15 times. By the time they've been through it 15 times, that person's likely to get snatched up by, let's say, Deloitte or Accenture, because the experience of some of their businesses succeeding and some of them failing is enough of a value add for Accenture to grab them and bring them to bear where I was in mergers and acquisitions, which is cool. But parallel to the point. So I realize this is what's happening. All the best knowledge is going to the top of the market. Again, not a bad thing. It's just what's happening. And I said, I have all that same knowledge. I've made some good money. I'm in a position where I can afford to do some consulting for some mid-sized companies that can afford to pay me, and bring that knowledge to those mid-sized companies, and then split off a piece of my time. Let's say I do 80% consulting and 20%, instead of charging for my time, I look for opportunities to bring my knowledge to bear in a much wider approach. So mentoring for some small businesses that really need a little bit of extra help, speaking to audiences like yours and on stages, so that I can share some of my experience and some of my knowledge to people who need it now and can't necessarily afford to pay Accenture's fees.
Right. I think it's one of the biggest barriers to getting guidance, whether it's through a professional coach, a consultant, whatever it be, which is why another aspect of the podcast, when I started it, was around mentorship, because it was actually mentorship that kind of led me down this path. Unfortunately, I thought the name Get Mentored was a bit of a weird name. I thought Get Coached was better. So
I agree.
hence why I went there. And unfortunately, there was also a podcast which was a big influence for me, called The Mentee, by Jeff Woods. So that name wasn't available. So anyways, just to give a little context to the story behind Get Coached. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I love the fact that you're at that point where you're wanting to pay it forward and add value to an audience, to a market, to an area that there's definitely a need. There's value there for sure. And the way you're delivering it is, I mean, you can't really get much better than offering your time at no cost. I'm sure there's standards that you hold as far as whether you're going to work with them. Do you mind sharing maybe kind of like how do you decide who you're going to work with, and obviously make sure that they maintain a certain level that is to your standards?
Yeah. So I have three different, let's call it, entry points into working with me. Number one, you have to be a crazy awesome business. And a perfect example of this I can give you is the Prowess Project. This is a business that I'm working with. And Ashley Connell, the leader of the Prowess Project, she started this business to help moms who are coming back to the marketplace after having a kid. Oh, it's hard for me not to swear out of how much I appreciate that, but that goes right to my heart. I'm like, I absolutely love what she's doing, and I can get behind that without any question. So that's number one. And I'd say it's probably hard for those people to get noticed by me, but she did. Number two, I mentor for an MBA, one specific MBA program, INSEAD University in Paris. They have businesses that come through as a part of their MBA. The MBA students start businesses, some of them, and those businesses submit themselves to their incubator, which they call the Launchpad. And any of the businesses in the Launchpad can petition to me as an advisor. And so those two, there's no way I'll ever get paid for the work that I do. Sometimes they reimburse me for the travel that I put in and stuff like that, but only sometimes, not even always that. And I do that really, truly just because I'm paying, as you said perfectly, I'm paying it forward, and I believe in, one, the Launchpad, and two, the Prowess Project, and other businesses like that are just really, really heart-centered, and something that I need to see them succeed. And then the third is I'm an advisor through a VC, and so that one's not free. That one, as the businesses generate value into the VC pays out some of that value to the advisors. So.
Well, you got to get paid sometimes, right?
You got to get paid sometimes, for sure. I mean, you can't keep doing what I do forever without getting paid, without question. It's not even a question of selfishness. I can't bring my gifts to the market if somebody isn't helping me pay my bills.
That's right. So there's obviously a lot of value and a lot of expertise that we could talk about, right? And the one topic though that when you'd mentioned just kind of what you wanted, that was kind of something top of mind for you, was the concept of learning how to learn, or another way of saying is meta learning. But there was a certain phrase that you said that really caught my attention. So I'll hand that off to you to kind of talk a little bit about your journey as far as how you've come about developing that skill set.
Cool. So like I said, when I was I've always been deep into learning. My wife, when she first met me, and I was in my 20s at the time, she looked at me and she said, and don't take this the wrong way. She looked at me and she said, "Have you done time?" We still laugh about this, but what she was getting at was, I'm in my mid 20s, and I was incredibly well read, and very well educated, and it just didn't make sense to her. She was like, people don't typically have the kinds of depth of knowledge that you have unless they've done time. So, as she's gotten to know me, she's come to appreciate that I've built a process around the way I learn, and she has started to learn some of that. She has her own process, which I respect. But so I've always loved learning. Through high school, through college, I really enjoyed learning. In college, I got 3 degrees in 4 years without doing summer school, just because I so much enjoyed the process and the material. But then, I move into this mergers and acquisitions world, which, as I mentioned to you, you always feel, even the well-experienced guys in the room probably still feel this way. But me, I was in my 20s. I knew I didn't know anything, and I'm sitting at the table with these guys. I was at a table once with something like 35 people in the room that had a combined 1,000 years of experience.
Hmm.
And me, I had 3. I was 3 of that 1,000 years. You when you're trying to keep up with that kind of experience and the depth of skill that these people have, you have to get good at getting good. You have to get fast at picking up speed. You have to get great at learning to learn so that you can catch up with the expectations that you have of yourself, let alone what's needed of you by the other people in the room. And as I grew into those particular shoes, the shoes of the guy who can learn what's going on in the room faster than anyone else, that became one of the strengths that I brought to the table. I left Wall Street at 17 years. I don't think I was ever in a room with anyone other than an intern who had less than 25 while I was doing the work I was doing. None of the people ever had the 10, 12, 15 years experience that I had. They had twice that. And so being able to learn incredibly fast was the thing that allowed me to continue earning my place at that table. And so that's how I got there. It starts from this genuine enjoyment of knowledge and information, to the point of consuming knowledge and information kind of the same way people consume junk food. But knowledge and information isn't junk.
No, there's junk inputs, I would say, right? But I'm sure the stuff you were putting into your mind wasn't really the junk food version of that stuff.
Well said. Well said.
So what's that process look like? Maybe high level, kind of what run us through what it would be that you would do to learn something at a faster pace than the average person.
Yeah, awesome. So there's a couple of different things. First, I like to separate learning into 2 functional categories. The first is ingesting information. And that's not the same thing as learning. You can ingest a whole bunch of information and still not know what it is. A lot of people think of this as memorization. Interestingly, rote memorization is actually something I'm very poor at. However, I've learned how to ingest information in a different way. So it turns out, um, actually, before I get too deep into that, so there's ingesting information, and then there's integrating that information into your skills or your knowledge. And that's sort of that's the learning part, in my opinion. A lot of people think of learning as the two of those things together. And when you separate them, then you have access to those two things in a different way. I hope you're with me so far. It's still very
Yep.
general.
Yep.
So what I do is I separate my day into different functional chunks. In order to ingest information very quickly, I look at the different places in my day where I'm in an ingestion information state. So from a brainwave perspective, any of the people that are listening and know this, you know that if you're in beta brain state, then your brain is primed to ingest information. Not just any information. If you're reading math or trying to look at architectural diagrams, those probably aren't going to come in as easily. But if you put them in a contextual framework that your body is expecting, then beta brain actually makes it very easy to ingest information very quickly. So, for example, I like to go for a run at noon every day. Typically, you get into your beta brain state during your run as you get into what you call the zone. So for the average person who wants to implement some version of what we're talking about here, look up a podcast like yours. The nice thing about podcasts is that they have a format that makes it very easy for you to align it with something like an hour-long workout.
Yeah.
As you're warming up in your workout, you're not in beta brain state yet. You're still in the warm-up stage in the podcast. We're talking about who we are, or maybe we're talking about some of our background. We haven't gotten to the deep information part yet. As you move in the podcast into that section where you're talking deep information, that's probably about the time in a workout that you're moving into beta brain, where you're focused enough on the performance of your body that your executive processor has to turn off in order to allow your body to continue functioning. And when that happens, the information that you take in that's contextually primed, and you did that contextual priming at the beginning of the podcast, the information you're taking in that's contextually primed gets downloaded directly into your brain. It's very cool.
It's more evidence that our brains are really just computers.
Yeah.
and
I can talk about why this is.
And for sure. I want to add, and because they're computers, that's why things like this work, right? A lot of the very cool tricks or tips or hacks or whatever term you want to use when they talk about it, I always think like, oh geez, that's like when I read about things about people hacking computers and technology. To me, there's so much correlation that I'm just like, man, that is so cool. Our brains are just they're biological computers, really.
Well,
so you're saying you can explain it? Please do.
Well, what I mean is I can tell you where it comes from and why it has to be that way. We're a very interesting animal, and this is something I can get into very deeply as well, maybe in a different conversation. We're a predator. We know that we're a predator because our eyes are in the front of our head, but we don't have any obvious predator abilities. We can't run fast. We can't jump high. We don't have incredibly big jaws that can sink teeth into hides, we don't have any claws. So it's not obvious what our predator ability is. Well, it turns out that our predator ability is actually skill sets. Very cool, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly, it's not adolescent skill sets. It's not individualistic, self-focused skill sets that make us capable predators. It's adult skill sets. So that is priming what I'm going to get to next. In order for us to be able to grow into adult skill sets, teamwork, communication, strategy, the things that make us effective as a team, leadership, uh, the social coordination of a fluid leadership scenario, these are all adult skills. In order to make us effective at learning these, A, well, B, quickly, C, we need to learn them in the context of the culture of our tribe. We needed to have a way to ingest the information of our culture, our tribe, and the skills that our tribe uses well very, very quickly. So our brain is actually sitting in this beta brain state until we're somewhere between the ages of 4 and 6 years old, downloading everything.
I can attest to that. 'Cause you were saying before 4 and 6?
Yes, before 4 and 6.
So I have a 6-month-old,
Mm-hmm.
and watching him take in all these new things for him is, yeah, I'm in awe of what is happening. And I wish we could see inside their brains as far as how that data is being collected, processed, disseminated, all of it. Because it's so fascinating to watch him observe and learn and develop these skill sets week over week, and all of a sudden he's able to like pick something up, whereas last week he didn't have the dexterity to do it. Or when we go outside for walks and it's a bit of a new environment and the wind's blowing or it's sunny and there's shadows, and just the way he stares at it, and he's kind of like, you can see him trying to process it. What am I observing? It's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's, as opposed to, so a human baby, as opposed to, say, a horse that comes out already knowing everything that it needs to know in order to survive. The reason that we're different in this respect is that we need to be in that download state, because culture of the human tribe, of the human animal, the complexity of culture is our competitive advantage. And it's inside culture that we maintain these adult skills that make us capable predators.
Hmm. A friend of mine read a book. I believe it's titled Born to Run. Have you heard that one? Read it?
I have, and
Okay.
I've met the author.
Oh, cool. So
Yeah.
his explanation to me as far as the premise is that there's a theory that one of our predatory advantages was actually our endurance. The
Hmm.
fact that we could hunt our prey over very long distances to the point where they would just get so tired that it's like, okay, now we've got that easy kill. Would would that kind of add to the concept of being able to develop? So if you combine those two, so the capability of building endurance and running long distances, and then combine it with the skill set of developing skills and working in team, that's a pretty formidable combination, hence why we got to where we're at.
That's right. That's how we conquered the world.
Yeah.
And it can be nothing else. I mean, think about what an animal will do if you start chasing it. Every animal out there is faster than us. You chase it a little
Yeah.
while, it'll run out ahead, circle back, get into the pack, and now you don't know which one is tired anymore.
Right.
Without the teamwork, which is what I'm calling adult skills, teamwork, communication, coordination, strategy, leadership, culture, without the capacity to work together as a team of 5 or 6 or 10 hunters, we have no chance against that animal.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the beginning phase of your learning process is around the beta, focusing on the beta as almost like timing when to consume that content, because your brain's just more receptive and absorbing it better. What's the next part of it?
A little bit of planning and routine.
Okay.
So beta happens for me 3 times a day, every day. The reason it happens 3 times a day, every day, is because I created a routine in my life that brings that beta in 2 extra times. It happens for everybody at least once. As soon as you wake up, you're in beta state until you get, and you know when you're in it, you're walking around, you feel like you're in a fog, maybe you go to the bathroom. It takes you 10 minutes to get a cup of coffee, where if you were doing it at 2 p.m., it only takes 30 seconds.
Right.
You're in beta state and your brain is still in that download mode instead of the process and execute mode. So um, I do I do data an additional 2 times beyond that. So you can make your beta shorter by, let's say, having a cup of cold coffee sitting on the side of your bed. You get up, you drink a little bit of that coffee, you do some jumping jacks, boom, beta is done. Or you can work hard to make your beta longer. There are lots of different reasons people do this. For example, everybody who wants to remember their dreams, they pull out a journal, they sit in bed, they start journaling. I don't particularly worry about my dreams, although plenty of people out there are telling us we should.
Right.
I respect that. I extend my beta so that I can get into a learning state, download that information, and stay in that beta state while I'm downloading information. So I get up out of bed, which could end your beta, but for me, it doesn't. I walk over to my living room, I load up a podcast, and I get down into meditation pose. It's not really a deep meditation. Really, the point is I need to stay in beta long enough so that the content portion of the podcast that I've loaded up starts to spit out the information that I've been priming myself since I got up for.
Mm-hmm.
So first, the routine was to extend the beta at the beginning of the day. Second is to create 2 other beta opportunities throughout the day, right? So William Faulkner has a very famous quote where he says, "I only write when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 a.m." What I love about this is we today in our society, we think of artist inspiration as something that doesn't come. When it strikes, you go to your art room and you start painting furiously for 3 days, and then you collapse,
Mm-hmm.
which is cool. I love it when I see that. But his quote points out to us that there is an alternate path. We can actually, ironically, schedule inspiration.
Hmm.
I use that same method. Rather than to schedule inspiration, I schedule beta brain, because I want to be learning. I want to be downloading information. So I do it the second time during the day with my daily run at noon. And then I do it a third time in the evening, sometime between 6 and 7, typically, while I'm cooking. Again, it's sort of a moving meditation. I know it sounds a little bit weird to think about cooking as a moving meditation. I don't know if you've ever had this experience.
I've not, but I've heard of it before. I believe it was actually Tim Ferriss, because when he was going through his process of writing the 4-Hour Chef book, he worked with some pretty renowned chefs, and I'm pretty sure that's where I read it, or it was either in one of his conversations on his podcast. But I have heard that idea of cooking, of being almost like a meditative practice.
Yeah, that's funny. He's kind of a smart dude.
Yeah. He what we're talking about right now, I feel, is something that he would be really into, as far as like planning out the beta phase of learning and downloading. That's really how he made his career, was learning how to learn new things, but do it in a very efficient way, right?
Yeah.
So hence why this is such an appealing topic to me. Was he was really one of the first entrepreneurial type books that I got into. Then it was his podcast that really got me into podcasts. So yeah, I've a lot of inspiration or influence there for sure.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, so basically I schedule my inspiration in terms of scheduling and prolonging the beta states that I get into. So that's number 2, is sort of the structure that I build around it. And then That's for ingesting information. And as I mentioned before, that's the first half of learning. The second half is to integrate that information into either a body of knowledge that you have mastery over or into a skill.
And how does that look? Because I feel like the ingesting part, I would say most people could develop that routine or that skill set fairly easily because it's relatively passive, right? But I think it's that next part where some people would struggle a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So the crux of, I mean, to give an example, I'm sure you guys have. I actually did this. I'm sure you've heard people coming from Europe or Asia who come here and have barely passable English.
Mm-hmm.
When I was much younger, I volunteered at a college to work with the students that were here to learn English, and to just have conversations, go out and spend time with them, have conversations with them so that they could translate their learned English into conversational English. And this was a piece of where I sort of developed the idea that you could learn the knowledge of a thing without necessarily having learned the skill that that knowledge theoretically corresponds to. And language is a perfect example. I'm sitting there at a table over ice cream with somebody who got perfect scores in their English exams in last semester's exams, and we're having a very hard time communicating effectively. Now, clearly, my English isn't the challenge here. I'm a native English speaker.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that there's a skill to communicating with somebody that doesn't speak your language, and perhaps I didn't have that skill, but that wasn't the purpose of us sitting there. It wasn't me building that skill. It was them building the skill of my language. So if they have perfect score, i.e. they ingested the language well, but we couldn't communicate, it means that their knowledge bank hadn't been integrated into their usable skills. So your question was, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, a couple of different ways. I do a thing called chunking. Obviously, the short answer is the only way you do it is by using it, right? You don't become a good archer by thinking about becoming a good archer. You do it by going out on the archery range. But there are ways that you can cut corners on this as well. And it looks the same as the way that we ingest the knowledge. First, I build a process around maximizing the value of the knowledge that I've already ingested and the integration that I'm about to do. So think about it like this. Your psyche, your mind really likes to know what's expected of it. So, and in addition, so it likes to know what's expected of it. And in addition, it likes to know that it's only going to be doing something for a short period of time. And it's almost like if you treat your brain as a separate entity, the computer that you're working with, it has preferences, and its preferences are kind of like a short form essay. Tell me what is about to happen, give me the content, make it short, and then tell me what just happened. And so I do this with something I call chunking that I learned from Sean Modell, somebody you can look up, more than several years ago, a long time ago. Chunking. First, I spend about 2 minutes priming the information that I'm about to spend time integrating. So this is the intro to the essay. And then I spend 5 minutes building a list by hand on paper, building a list of exactly what I'm about to cover. So kind of like a session outline. And then I spend 1 minute organizing that list in order of challenge, but not top down. I want the most challenging thing first, the second most challenging thing last, and then I want the easier things in the middle. Because your brain likes to work with the beginning and the end of a chunk of information harder. I don't know why. It just likes to do that. And that's part of why your brain likes to know what's expected of it. Give it its list, give it a time expectation so that I guess it gets good at working harder at the beginning and the end because of that. And then you're working through sort of, let's call it an inverse bell curve. You're working through the challenge from hardest to easiest to hardest. Um, so 2 minutes priming, 5 minutes list building, 1 minute reorganizing the list, 30-minute chunk working through. So if you're trying to learn archery, I probably would spend, this is a weird one, I probably would spend 2 minutes thinking about, 2 minutes visualizing the archery, visualizing me shooting a perfect shot. I'd spend, I don't think you need 5 minutes to do a list of how you're going to shoot, but I would have different challenge shots for my 30-minute chunk of work. And I would do the hardest ones first, easiest ones in the middle, and then the hardest ones last again. And then at the end, reverse. So 1 minute deconstructing the list, 5 minutes looking through the list, making sure I covered everything, replaying it in my head, and then 2 minutes priming it for moving it from the front of your brain into long-term memory.
Right. So in total, that's less than an hour. I think it was
It's
like
46 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was around 45. That's really cool. And especially for people that feel, because obviously a very common excuse, we'll just use the proper word here, a really common excuse for not learning new things is time, right? And yes, time's important. The argument we can make there is it's more about prioritizing than finding time and all that kind of stuff. But when you're suggesting that a lot of the work is done almost in a passive way, right? As far as like digesting or ingesting the information, and then it's 45-minute chunks to apply and really like burn it into your brain so that you're properly learning it. I think
The
that's
computer
something that,
term, burning it
yeah,
in. That's right.
yeah, I think that's something that most people, if it's important enough to them anyways, I think that's something that they could look at and go, you know what, I can schedule 45 minutes a day or every other day to work on that skill set that I want to develop and learn. And then in the meantime, I'm making sure to ingest the content and the knowledge that I need to during my beta brainwave phase, beta waves, beta mode. I'm trying to think of
Beta
like a fun
mode.
way of saying it.
I like beta mode.
Beta
I
mode,
always
I
call
like
it
that one.
beta brain state, but I
Yeah,
like beta mode.
beta mode. There we go.
Yeah.
We have just coined a new term. Well, that was a lot of fun. Was there anything extra that you would want to share that maybe I didn't ask a good question on as far as that learning process?
Yes, actually. Thank you for asking. Surprisingly, uh, diet, exercise, and sleep affect your learning a huge amount. So I mean, everybody needs a different amount of sleep. Maybe it's 6.5 hours, maybe it's 9.5 hours, whatever the amount of sleep you need. If you're going to be learning something important the next day, make sure that you get that amount of sleep and that it's high quality sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, I don't know why. I'm sure somebody out there does, but our brain likes to eat sugar. Our brain prefers to use blood sugar. Ironically, if you eat a high sugar diet, your brain doesn't work as well.
Mm.
I don't fully understand this mechanism, I'll be honest, but I do know that this is the case. So to me, when I turn on the light switch and the light bulb goes on, that's enough for me. I'm sure there are people out there that really understand this mechanism better, but it turns out eating a high sugar diet makes your brain perform not as well. So
Right.
I personally choose not to eat a high sugar diet because I like my brain to perform well.
And then exercise. Yeah. Exercise, we've heard a lot. There's a lot of evidence behind that one.
Yep.
What's your personal workout routine look like? Is it just the run or do you do a little bit more than that?
I do more than that.
Okay.
My workout routine's a little funky, actually. um, After I get out of beta state in the morning, I do 10 burpees, so a very short but very intense workout, followed by a long walk. And you probably know all about this. I do that to help my body flush the cortisol that's in the blood, right? Turns on your brain faster. I wait until I'm done with my beta brain state before I do that. But as soon as I'm done with my beta brain, I want that cortisol out.
Mm-hmm.
Every single day. I do another walk at 10 a.m. I do my run at noon. I do another walk at 2 p.m. And I do another walk with my wife at 5 p.m. So in a good day, I break 20,000 steps.
I was going to say, you're definitely cracking 10,000.
Yeah, in a good day, 20,000. 15,000 is about my goal. I feel like if I haven't hit 15,000, it's either one of those days where you just can't get off the couch, which is okay. Those happen too.
Mm-hmm.
Or, my in-laws are in town. And then, in addition to that, I go to the weight room for 10 minutes a week.
10 minutes a week? That's it?
That's right. 10
and
minutes a week.
I would assume then you lift quite heavy, right? Yeah.
Heavy and slow.
Heavy, slow, probably close to your max weight possible, right?
60 to 90 seconds, 7 to 10 reps.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that approach before.
Yeah.
Because it's just about duration of keeping the
Time
muscle under
tension.
stress. Yeah, time under tension. That's the proper term. Yeah. I like that. That was a methodology I was using for a while, and I really enjoyed it. And then I made a shift to go more into gymnastic strength training, so body weight stuff.
Nice.
But that's obviously a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Well, that was, you know what, we've covered a lot. That was a really cool conversation. I like to wrap things up though with one question to try and help the audience know what to do next. So with everything that we did discuss, what's that one thing you would suggest the audience take action on so that they could level up their learning ability?
Awesome question. I hope you don't mind me doing 3 because it's too hard to do just one.
Sure.
Number 1, stop getting on social media first thing in the morning. That beta brain state that you have absolutely naturally first thing in the morning is too valuable to use for anything other than an intentional knowledge download. Number 2, schedule your day, use your routines, and make sure that you maximize the value of anything that you're doing, cooking, running, to ingest information. And number 3, learning is not that hard. You build a little bit of a structure and just execute. 45 minutes, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good advice. Very much appreciated. It's reminding me of some of the things I should reincorporate into my daily routines. So I'm feeling motivated. I think tomorrow is going to be a new start to learning something, a new skill set. I just got to pick what it is.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to learn more about you or reach out and connect, what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I'm very active on Instagram at Luke Root, LUCROOT.
Perfect. And I'm sure there's other places, but I'll make sure to include those in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, that was a really fun conversation, Luke. Or do you go by Luke or Lucas? Because you said Luke there, so it kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah. Online Luke, in person Lucas.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lucas, for being a guest. That was a lot of fun. And I'm sure we will stay in contact and have some further conversations.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Take care. Thanks for listening to Get Coach 360. If you're looking for more information, you can head over to our website, which is getcoach360.com. You'll find the show notes for this and every other episode there. And if getting actionable advice every week from professional coaches is something you want more of, then make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.